You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
First and foremost, kudos to producer Vic. He is playing under the weather today on the Friday edition of Leafs Morning Take, and dare I say the Maple Leafs could have been 2 wins away from advancing the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 1967. Probably not. They probably would have found a way not to be there in that situation. It's Nick Alberga, Carter Hutton, presented by Bet365. What's up, Utsy?
Not much, buddy. I feel you. I'm a little under the weather, too. Sore throat. We're here. We're gamers. We get it done, me and Vic. It is tough to watch Florida dismantle Carolina like this, though. It is tough, and I will say, if I'm a Leafs fan, it's got to sting a little bit.
Probably a bit. I would add on the producer Vic front, well, most guys in the Stanley Cup playoffs are playing injured, and those accrue over times. The same could be said for podcasters like ourselves. Producer Vic was on the road with me pretty much all Stanley Cup playoffs, and it catches up to you. And also the 87 beers that producer Vic had in that time frame too. So that catches up to you. Wish producer Vic a speedy recovery, but he is playing hurt today. We appreciate that, Vicky. Thank you so much.
He's a trooper. I love it. He's a gamer. Knew it right away. Vic's my boy. I love Vic. He's getting to know him in person there in Nashville was a lot of fun, and he's here. He's game. You guys should hear him behind the scenes. We're not putting him on camera today. We don't want to lose viewers with that voice he's got.
Beautician, and a lot of our watch parties, half of the Armenian contingent in Toronto were on location, and that's thanks to producer Vic. So shout out to producer Vic. Our charity partner this season is Sick Kids. Want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show? Hit us up with a super chat. Proceeds from our super chat will go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and 3rd in the world. Now, I got some heat on X. Surprise, surprise. I just merely asked who Canada's general manager was at the World Championships. they lost to Denmark, dude. They lost to Denmark. Maybe I should give the Danes more credit, Utz.
I don't know. They got pounded in the third period. Like, what were the shots? 22-10.
I didn't watch a second of that.
For the Danes, it was 22-10. Like, the Danes held serve. I don't know. If I'm Dean Evanson, I'm worried about just what you had. Because there were some good players there. They had it. And Binnington was really good in the third period from what I saw. Again, that's got to be mental for him, too. Like, the collapse against Winnipeg late, then the collapse against Denmark late. Oh, man, that is a tough go. I know he has the Four Nations Cup under his belt. And he's playing good hockey, but I like to dig. I know you're always up to it. You're always stirring the pot somewhere, Nicky, and that's a good job by you.
Well, dude, all I could see, like, again, I didn't watch a second of that tournament. I didn't watch that game. Then I saw the location. I'm like, oh, they're in Stockholm, Sweden. My only explanation, full send job by Team Canada the night prior to playing the Danes, and half the team showed up. They were there in spirit. That's about it.
Yeah. No, it's tough. It was home team. Obviously a cool win for them. You know, I said this yesterday to a couple buddies. Would you rather lose to, like, USA in the quarters or semis, or lose to the Danes, where it's like the biggest victory in hockey? You know, I think it's it's good for hockey. It spreads a little bit, but that being said, obviously a tough one to swallow for a lot of the stars that were there.
Look, you're talking to a serious troller on social media, but if your dig to get at me being Canadian is to preach that the Danes beat Canada at the World Championships, doesn't really bother me. No. We're going to get set for the Olympics next year in Milan Cortina, and Canada's going to win again. So that's a spoiler. Yeah, a spoiler. Canada's going to win again,
and everyone knows the World Championships are just a party. Like it's something that's very.
Did you ever go?
Guys. What?
Did you ever go?
No, I got asked twice actually. I got asked after my year in St. Louis, but I had herniated a disc in my neck, and I just came back, started playing. That was my contract year, so it was tough. Fortunately for me, Marty Brodeur was the assistant GM, I think, or GM of the team. So he asked me.
Marty Brodeur.
It was hard, but like realistically, that was my biggest payday, my contract. If I went and hurt my neck, I was the top free agent. Darcy Kemper was going to be their goalie. So like comparatively, I really had nowhere to go, which stung. And then the next time I got asked was the next year after Buffalo. Jason Botterill was a GM, who was my GM. And we were having our daughter. Our daughter was born in June, and it was tough. Even actually Botterill's wife was so mad at him for even asking me because of the fact that's probably my biggest regret in hockey, was not getting to wear the Canada jersey when I got asked. But you know, looking back now, I don't think I would have changed how I said no.
That's fair. And I guess the story out of that, Marc-Andre Fleury had a chance to be part of the rare triple gold club. They couldn't get the job done. They're finished at the World Championships. Do you remember where those tournaments were? Because that, like, if I was the player, that's the big selling point for me. And that's why I imagine Sidney Crosby was on a bird pretty quickly when he found out it was going to be in Stockholm, Sweden. What a place!
Wasn't there? One of them was like frick, I wish I remembered somewhere. I'd have to look back. I'm sure I can figure out the years. I want to say one was like Czech Republic, Czechia or something like that.
Not bad. Okay.
Somewhere. I know one of them was a really good trip and guys were excited, but as I talked to more guys that played, everybody told me it was just a party. Like you go there and you party and you play. And I was like at this point in my career where I had never had a payday. And if I went there and got hurt, it would have been something I think I would have regretted more than making the contract that I got.
Could somebody clear this up for me? Was the tournament in Denmark or Sweden? I see somebody talking about them playing Denmark in Denmark.
I think they were in Denmark. I think that's where they were.
Oh, the game was in Denmark.
Yeah, the game was.
So that was
a home game for them. They went there.
Oh, okay.
The crowd was rocking. It was pretty fun to watch, like the finishing of it.
Hey, my mistake then, because that's a bigger, cooler story. Is like the riding the momentum of the home crowd. I thought it was in Stockholm, but still, Denmark's an incredible place too. I've had a chance to go over there, and I've always wondered the extracurriculars in that tournament. Full send job. You got McKinnon there. It's kind of cool to see Crosby and Celebrini get the magic going a bit, eh?
No, I think that was really cool. I think you just see the passing of the torch. And I saw a lot of Chicago fans like getting all rattled that he's getting there, getting the VIP treatment, learning so much. And that's like where you learn too, though, right? You learn how to be a pro. You get to see how he does things the right way. And at his age and his pedigree and everything he's done, he's still in there full tilt. He takes such good care of himself. It's an eye-opening experience. And I remember that when I first went to San Jose. I remember seeing Patrick Marleau and just the way that he like prepared to practice and everything. And then you think you're working hard and then you see like a real pro, a guy that's been there for so long and it's eye opening. So it's always a good experience for those younger guys to see that.
Producer Vic did some digging. It was Germany and France in 2017 when Hutz's contract ended. Does that ring a bell?
There it is. Yeah. So 2017.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know which year it was. I was at BioSteel Camp in Toronto hosting a show on a daily basis, like for like a week and a half. I think it was a week for NHL Network Radio, and I had Connor McDavid. We did a one-on-one with Connor McDavid, and he was coming off playing in the World Championships. And dude, if you can't get anything from Connor McDavid in August, you're not getting anything from this guy ever. I tried my best because I know he went on a post-tournament trip, which included Amsterdam and Paris. And I gave one of those questions like, hey, what'd you do in Amsterdam? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And just nothing. No, he didn't want to be there, dude. The guy was texting like in the break before we got to the actual segment. I'm like, this is going to be tough. One of the toughest interviews I've ever conducted. And lo and behold, this is the best player on the planet.
I know it's wild that you can just show personality too, right? That's what, you know what I really enjoy? Yeah. I heard Marchand talk yesterday, just like real interview where he's very just genuine and he's talking about how he's processing the game. And, you know, obviously he has a lot of humor. You see him in Biz Nasty, but I just feel like that is so much more genuine. I feel like it almost builds your relationship. I think at times if Connor McDavid would just be a little more genuine, it would just make people love him more, right? You don't need to show behind the curtain, but I feel like at times he's so standoffish. I know he's a little bit more introverted.
Yeah.
But even every time they do one of those shows, man, you get to see behind the scenes a little bit. It just builds your brand. Like, look at Matthew Tkachuk. I think that was a great point they brought up last night after that Carolina series 2 years ago when he swept him in overtime and left. Then he's on. Like, you don't need to be on all these talk shows, but it's built his brand. Now he's become a person that's loved, and it's good for the game in all areas.
Yeah, and that's not me criticizing Connor McDavid, by the way. We love you, Connor. Go Leafs, go. July 1st, 2026 can't come soon enough. When we talked about this on yesterday's podcast, the media, we've got no tampering regulations. We'll do all we can to bring Connor McDavid to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And quite frankly, I hope Edmonton wins the Stanley Cup. I think it would soften the blow for Oilers Nation when this guy does leave in free agency. But anyways, what do you think of that game, man? The Panthers are an absolute wagon. And I think the Leafs got the best set of the Panthers late in that series. And the type of team, when they find their groove in their game, they are tough to beat. And right now they are dialed in. And Carolina Hurricanes, 2 losses away from their season coming to an end once again in an Eastern Conference final.
It's tough. You know, I feel for a team like that. You know, they're such a hard-nosed team. You see Rod Brindamore before the game talking. They're so dialed in. And then hearing Jordan Staal talk after hits home a bit. A friend of mine, you know, they have a good team. It's just, they just can't compete. And it feels like they just get so disheveled. Like it just everything gets out of the wrapper. They get that early goal, the pressure, obviously a little bit of a turnover there by Orlov, not being able to clear the puck out of the zone. And next, you know, it's in back of the net to start. And then from there, it feels like they're trying to be someone they're not. They're trying to be more physical. They're trying to overextend themselves. And Florida just doesn't waver. Like, they don't waver from their
No.
game. They just keep coming at you. And I think just how their game is built on being so structured and so simple and great goaltending, man, is it deflating. And if you hear the boo birds, fans are too hard on them down there too. Fans everywhere are too hard on these players. But a performance like that, man, it just feels like anyone's going to be really hard to beat Florida.
They just eat you alive, right? They make you uncomfortable, and I think that's what starts everything. Whereas Florida has a game plan. Most games, they come in there, they play heavy, they play hard. They're so good on the road. And then on top of that, like, this is the cherry on top, dude. They got Sergei Bobrovsky. There was a couple stops early in that game. He did this to the Leafs too, and it happened in Game 7. That flurry last 9 minutes or so of period 1 of Game 7, where he just made some 10-bell stops. And this being a goalie, you make those stops, it goes to the confidence, it goes to the legs, it goes to the team, and that's the rest. The rest was history. But that's the extra line of defense that some teams don't have. Is you may have a good team in front of you, case in point the Oilers, but do you have a Bob back there? Most do not.
It doesn't, and it sets the tone for the hockey game. I think that's the biggest thing I see with Florida. There's like a calming presence. And now you talk about Freddie Anderson not having a great Game 1. And I don't think he was horrible yesterday. Like, even the first goal was tipped. It went off defenseman sticking in. But you have to make saves. Like, it's just the business that you're in. And Bobrovsky makes those saves, and it sets the tone for the hockey game. Even in Game 1 or Game 7 there against the Leafs, they came out well. They had some shots. I thought Florida was, taking, and then Toronto gets some good looks, and it's like timely saves. If one of those goals go in, it changes the whole format of the game and just the way you feel. And then you're not playing from behind. And I feel like with Carolina right now, when they start playing from behind, they overextend, and Florida just eats you up. They chew you up and spit you out. The way they forecheck, the way they defend with their big D goalie, man. If you don't have a good goalie, you don't got nothing.
Exactly. And I have trouble blaming goaltenders when it's 5-0 or 2-0 or 3-0. Last time I checked, you got to score. And while I understand Carolina scored last night, great call by the Panthers to challenge that one. And a lot of the folks in the chat making a good point about Sergei Bobrovsky. For the majority or a good chunk of this contract, I think he's got 1 year left or maybe 2 after this one. People shat on Dale Talon for signing him to that contract, but it's amazing what 1 Stanley Cup and potentially 3 visits to the Stanley Cup final can do. Vezina trophies, like, the guy's the real deal, and I think proving his worth. 1 cup alone proves the worth of the contract, I think.
For sure. I agree. I think anyone in this chat or in Leafs Nation would gladly sign any goalie to a massive deal if they knew that they would get a cup out of it, and he has done that. The one thing that they did bet on, though, is the way that he takes care of himself, right? And I think that's something that's so important where, you always hear contracts of guys getting big deals and shutting it down. And we've seen that throughout so much time where, for me, a guy that sticks out right now is Cal Peterson. He signs a 5-year deal, $5 million, and he disappears. Where Bobrovsky was never going to disappear. And I don't want to put those guys in the same category because Bobrovsky's world class, but the way he conditions himself, the way he's evolved, the way he takes care of himself is wild, right? Like, this is a guy that has revolutionized the position in off ice, in mental capabilities and everything. He's always evolving. So in that case, yes, it was a few tough years, but it wasn't like he was just going to sit there and be stagnant, even though he was getting paid. Like, the way he takes care of himself is so amazing. And that being said, now they look like geniuses. And yes, early it didn't look good. But right now, this is the same thing we could say about Matthews. Maybe down the road is maybe this contract ends up being unbelievable as he puts his team over the top. But until then, there's always going to be those doubts.
I can't get over pictures of Bobrovsky without his equipment on, dude. He's like a $140 soaking wet, and with his equipment, he looks like a brick wall. It's insane to me. But the Florida Panthers 2 wins away from advancing to the Stanley Cup final for the 3rd consecutive season. Meantime, monster guest on today's show, TSN hockey insider Darren Dreger is going to drop by in about 15 minutes time. I've got like 17,000 questions to ask this guy. Like, he is the guy to ask all these things to, and we're going to get some clarity on today's podcast, Huts.
He was just up here, actually. He was just up in Thunder Bay. I believe his daughter goes to law school here. So a couple of my buddies were saying that they saw him out for dinner or something like that, asking if I don't know. But he's a great interview. He's so intelligent. He knows what's going on. I love having Dregs on. It should be a great interview here. And hopefully a little inside track here, right? There's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of unknowns as we head into the summer here with, how this team is going to look next year.
Zach Phillips writes in, Huts, how much weight did you lose per game? Good question.
Depends. But like on a really, really busy night, I would drop 6 to 8 pounds. Holy that was shit. Like a normal, movement
Who
for me.
Who needs the Atkins diet, right? Fuck.
Would you say Atkins that? Yeah, easier than that. But you know what? Honestly, for me, early in my career, this is when like hydration became so important. When I was in college and early in my pro career, I remember, so we would leave after the game, right? So a bus would wait for you there. Like, so say if we're playing at Leafs, you guys know the ramp that goes down under the rink.
Yeah.
So play the Leafs, say it was a busy night. I'd get on the bus. We'd take the bus out to the airport. And while I was sitting on the bus, I would start to cramp my groins, my calf. So I would have to stand up. And then I got to the point where I started to like work on hydration, like before with salts, with everything that goes into it. And it becomes so important. And for me, a big factor was heating. Like I would overheat because I ran hot and like the way I played and competed, similar to Bobrovsky, where like I was athletic and I had to work hard to play, where I played with other goalies like Linus Allmark, like the way Connor Hellebuck plays. It's more sustainable because they're more based on positioning and size, where I had to really work hard. But man, it was hard. That's when I started to play 3 games in a week, it was a lot of wear and tear. And then you're starting managing your groins and you're starting to manage that. So hydration and a lot of IVs, they became illegal. Actually, they banned them. But early in my career, I used to IV all the time after practice and stuff, just to make sure I was ready to go when it was game time.
I would IV during periods, get you fresh for the next period. I could only wonder what it was like for like a guy like Dominic Hasek, where he did his Michael Phelps routine like every game. Like he was just swimming everywhere and making unbelievable save after unbelievable save. Whereas maybe like a Marty Brodeur, very stand up. The difference is in how much weight you would lose in calories. But I think that's a fascinating aspect to look at moving forward. At the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Your motorhome or travel trailer isn't just for getaways. It's a moneymaker on wheels. Most RVs sit parked in the driveway. With RV Easy, you can rent out your motorhome or travel trailer. An owner of $20,000 this year. Founded, owned, and operated by Canadians, RV Easy takes care of everything, including full insurance coverage provided for every rental. And best of all, you choose when to rent and set your own pricing. List your RV for free today at RVEZY.com. That's RVEZY.com. RV Easy. Rent your RV, make money, easy. Any shock from you that Brendan Shanahan was let go yesterday?
No, not really. Again, I don't really know what this changes, right, moving forward. Yes, I know he was a big figurehead, but at the end of the day, he had hands involved. There were still GMs, there were still coaches, but not surprised here, Nick. I feel like the ball had to drop on this.
Yeah, myself included. And I did a video with Zach you guys should check out over at the Leafs Nation 401 here on YouTube, just outlining the decision, moving on, the track record, the resume. It's a results-oriented business, and I'm not discrediting everything that Brendan Shanahan did off the ice, including Legends Row, retiring some of the greats in their jerseys. Remember the whole thing with James Van Riemsdyk having to change his number, but it's a results-oriented business. 2 series wins in 11 years. I think the writing's been on the wall for numerous years, and they get to the end of the contract and they move on, plain and simple. I think the interesting part about this, they're not going to replace the position. I think there's going to be some streamlining. I think some others are going to lose their jobs along the way over the next couple of weeks. And by the sounds of it, Brad Treliving is going to report right to Keith Pelly here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Maybe that's a better way to go about it. And there's no doubting what Shanahan done. I think the Leafs brand is in a good place, right? Because there's so many other things that goes into that position, right? It's not just dealing with what's going on with your GM, what's going on with on the ice. There's just the infrastructure, the community of everything that involves in Leaf Nation. And I think he's done a great job in that. But at the end of the day, like sitting here with this tenure, the plan was to win a Stanley Cup, and there's still 2 playoff series wins is obviously not good enough. When we look at a team like Carolina, who's back in the conference final again, Dallas, who's been in the conference final year after year. So there is that standard that needs to be held. And he was making a lot of money. And there, you get a position where you make a lot of dough, there's going to be repercussions. And that being said, I think it moves in the right direction here. I just don't know the immediate impact of this firing or rehiring or whatever the structure is going to be when the players and contracts are in set. You're going to make more noise during free agency with your signings, with your prospects, than you are in front office stuff.
Well, I was going to ask you as a player, like, are guys talking in the group chain? Like, are they going nuts? Like, can you believe Shanny's gone? Like, is there a lot of activity, a lot of conversation, or people are just like, meh, whatever?
I think more whatever, right? It's probably trickier for the guys that have been there a long time, just like relationship building, right? Yeah. Like you've become friends with him, right? You get to the point where there isn't that fear of GMs and head coaches. You become peers, right? Like you're set in your ways. You're not going anywhere, and you're all working at the same goal. So I think that is a bit of a change, right? Because you've built that relationship. But I don't think anyone really overthinks this, right? So you're so caught up in just trying to get better, right? The season's over. You're decompressing. I know they were golfing yesterday, God forbid. And
a couple days ago, it's been raining.
Well, whatever, right? Like, I don't know. It's so crazy to me that everyone gets so caught up in that. Like, they're out of the playoffs. It is what it is. But now you're so caught up in the next phase. Like, where's your contract at? When are you starting to train? Where are you going home? And I feel like this stuff is just kind of on the outside. This is more us making noise than I think the individual players, where if it's a head coaching change or a general manager change, it's a little closer to home, especially head coach. I find when a head coach's changes the whole dynamic of the team, where your role is. Now you're worried if this guy's going to fit with you, if he likes you, where I think when it's a front office change like this, it's not as a dramatic effect other than like the relationship you have with him.
Look, I was the first to joke about this, but we got to set the line at 24 hours, and then these guys are allowed to golf. Because you're right, Huts. A picture surfaced, I believe, yesterday about most of the guys at a clubhouse just having a bite after a round or before a round. Domi was there, Matthews was there, and others, and like we got to let this go. Like, it was a joke maybe the first couple of years, but after 24, like, what do you want them to do? Just sit at home and dwell for 3 weeks and more? Another Game 7 loss? Like, we're humans.
I know. Yeah, it is what it is, right? They're humans. And again, this is like another factor that hinders players that don't really want to come to Toronto, that don't want to.
People think they're golfing when the season's done, which they are.
And again, like, if you're a private guy, right? So, for example, we were chatting about McDavid earlier about how he's a tough interview. Like, it's already hard enough to be Connor McDavid. It's hard enough to be someone, or you're trying to draw someone into this market where, like, say a player like Sam Bennett or Aaron Ekblad is like, we've been living in Florida for all these years. We're superstars, right? We've won cups. We can go and do anything we choose. And now it's like, okay, so now you're trying to get a guy into a market that we get taxed heavier. I can't go to the grocery store. I can't do anything in a normal life. So that's not appealing to everybody. For younger guys, Austin Matthews, who fits that superstar status, he loves it, right? He's into the clothes. He's into the lifestyle. But that doesn't suit every player that has a family or has a different lifestyle. So these are things that are great about Toronto, but then at times it hinders them when you try to, bring big fish into a big market.
Definitely. And I think when you getting back to the conversation about Shanahan, the writing was on the wall. If you talk about highlights or lowlights, clearly winning the draft lottery is like the biggest thing for me back in 2016, changed the focus trajectory of the franchise when they got Austin Matthews. I mean, the lowlights, there's obviously a bunch of them. You could say a lot of pros too. But to me, it was just continuously running it back with a core that we knew couldn't get the job done. And we knew this years back. And good on Shanahan. You stick with your people. He did. And I think in the end, it burned him in the ass, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think so too. Even looking back now, it's funny how many years we've done this. And then the other one for me that you start to think of is like, so Dubas comes in, right? Then Keith comes in as boy. And then it got to the point where it was like only Sault Ste. Marie prospect.
It was wild.
Right? Like,
wild.
And if
Matt
you're
Murray.
overseeing, like, if you're like Shanahan's a guy that's been around the NHL forever. I get Kyle Dubas being loyal to the guys that got him there, through the Marlies, through the Greyhounds, but like, that's such like blinders on. It's so wild to oversee that and not like veto a few of those things, where I felt like year after year going back to the well with the same guys and getting the same results and not thinking that was a difference. When we watch all these other teams, their big guys have to be difference makers in the big time of year and playoffs. Your game has to be built for the playoff, and it never got there. And I do believe there was good changes along the way, but at the end of the day, you look at that and you're like, I don't care what you did off the ice. Like, I think you could give up all those good things you did if they would have got to a Stanley Cup final or won a cup and whatever your business relations were like as the president. But that being said, the Leafs are in a good spot. I don't know. I feel like this is good riddance in a sense.
At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And again, Keith Pelly and I believe Brad Treliving will be there too to speak to the media, address the media coming up at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So look out for that. Also, we got a super chat in support of Sick Kids. Devlin, I didn't miss you. Don't worry. I saw you in the chat there. Much love from the Sudbury, Ontario, Canada hot take. Mitch Marner to the Florida Panthers July 1st. Imagine that transpired. That's
No, I don't. That'd be wild.
That would be wild.
I don't know. I was doing something this morning and I don't know what just like came over me. And I was thinking like Brad Marchand winning a Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers. Like, just kind of like, I had this thought. And then you think of Mitch Marner, like winning it with the Florida Panthers, or like, is there a worse team outside of the Bruins? Like if Marner went to the Bruins and won a cup, like, Oh my goodness. This is wild times as we start to creep into summer and he doesn't have a contract and what's going to go on. But I also think it's something that has to happen. Like,
yeah, I do too.
I think it
it's time
has
move on.
to. Like, it sucks that he goes win somewhere, but I think it has to, Nick.
Imagine Marner signs a deal with Florida like 7 years times $9.5 million because of the state tax.
I know. I wouldn't be surprised.
People would be like, if he tried to come back and play a game, the border would be like, you're not coming back. Sorry, you got to sit this game out.
If he takes like just a discount deal because the taxes. But I also think that this is like kind of not fair either too, right? I don't know how you change the landscape, but it is hard because this is something I dealt with when I was dealing with contracts. Like the market you're going to go to, what state you're going to pay tax in has a big impact on your take home, right? Like throw out the window what you make AAV and what's going to be shown on TV. Like what am I taking home is the most important thing as an athlete. And the only perk that I would say Marner, Matthews, Morgan Riley has serving pizzas and on the ads is you do make extra money playing for the Leafs if you're a star player. But if you're that borderline like second, third liner that you're not really marketable, like so a player like Calle Yarncroc, okay, like he's not really getting a bunch of deals, outside of hockey, where he's like if he gets an offer in like Nashville or Dallas, he played in Nashville as well. You make so much extra money just being there. And it's such I think it's BS even when the Stamkos, right? You're trying to get Stamkos and like you start looking at the take home and how much you're going to lose. You're like, I don't like it that much, you know?
Canadian Tire, man, the old days. Again, there's been a lot of conversation about John Tavares. Maybe that was a blip in the radar of Shanahan. But again, if there's a player of the ilk of John Tavares in free agency, like it's hindsight's 2020. It would be so ridiculous. This guy wants to come to your team. He's probably the number one free agent in recent memory, and you're going to be like, no, thanks. No, the Leafs did the right thing there. I can't harp on Dubas and company for bringing John Tavares into the mix. But Marner does have the ability to become one of the most hated athletes ever in Canada, in Toronto specifically. If he were to choose Boston, Montreal, I think people would lose their shit if he goes to Carolina, considering we saw at the trade deadline. And the Florida Panthers, there's like 3 or 4 teams, and I wonder if he dare go that route. And if he imagine like Marner as a Boston Bruin, people would lose their shit huts.
Yeah, 100%. It'd be crazy. It would actually be crazy the amount of hate he would get. He's going to get a ton of hate anyway, no matter what happens. Like, and the fact that like that Randon trade was blocked, what's gone on to go from a guy that is treated like a god, you know, who's loved by everybody. To seeing him somewhere else is going to be awesome. But I don't know. It is crazy to think about him being somewhere else. And the immediate fact that like, I do think at some point he's going to go somewhere and he's going to burn you. Like you're going to see him win. You're going to see something happen.
In the regular season, game 64, he'll burn you. But in the playoffs,
yeah, he's a good player though. He's still a good player. I don't know. Who knows if it ever translates.
Yeah, he doesn't scare me in the playoffs. Yeah,
it might though. You don't know. Like we've seen many guys have no playoff success, and all of a sudden it turns over.
Well, if it does, it does. And the hot take, I don't want to foreshadow anything in the hot take, but I think it's an excellent take today. Just be careful what you wish for. You're riding shotgun with Papi and Tavares and Nylander. Keith Pelly was quoted yesterday saying the responsibility and driving motion is for the Leafs to win a championship. It was determined that a new voice was required to take the team to the next level in the years ahead. I had no issue with the PR standpoint yesterday. I was curious to see if they're going to say he was fired or let go. All they say is that they didn't extend the contract. So,
and again, I think that's on him too. Like Pelly, you're in charge. You're in, you know, I was thinking about this the other day with the Islanders and like letting Lou Lamoriello come there and like, they don't even brand their players there. Like they're not allowed to do interviews. They're not allowed to have social media. They can't have beards.
Facial hair.
Like it's crazy. Like how, and in a generation now where like you need relationships to your players. And I feel like they've at least done a good job of that in Toronto, where even like the next gen games and like the things that like bring fans in and make it more diverse and grow the market, right? When you go to a Raptors game, like how diverse is that crowd? Where when you go to a Leafs game, it's still like they're trying to expand and do things to like really get into the market, which is good. But that being said, like all this stuff about the way the team is and the core, it goes on ownership. Like at the end of the day, it's your team. You're running everything. And I think when I look at Buffalo in that sense, it was like too much ownership, right? They had too much control. You know, you get the right people in place. Yes, you have trust, but you still just can't give them free reign. You have to monitor. And that being said, big changes will happen because on the ice, the product is there. It just, you gotta find a way to get to the cup final and win a cup.
Got to find the sweet spot too. I think that's a really good point. Where in Buffalo, like the Pagulas are walking around on a daily basis, I bet. And then in Toronto, like you wouldn't have a clue if you passed the owners on the street. Like there's got to be an in between somewhere there, no?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I remember sometimes Terry Pagula, like we'd be getting ready for a game, so we're like in the dressing room, and then I'm the starting goalie, and I'm getting ready to go out. You like we're watching the clock. We usually start walking at like 10 seconds, at like 2 minutes, 10 seconds to get out for warm-ups. And sometimes he'd be like standing in the corner of the dressing room, just like feeling the music, like right in there. And again, like it's his right to do that. He's the owner. He owns a team. Yeah. He pays us millions of dollars. But I also think there's a little bit of like a presence for a younger guy. Like you're standing there getting ready to go play on the ice, and the owner, Terry Pagula, the billionaire, standing there like in his beat up Nikes and his old suit. I had a good relationship with him. He's a unique guy. But I also think at times, like you need to draw the line of like ownership versus like being buddies with the team and being like around the locker room.
That's a tough one too in any job, man. That's a really good point. It's just like, when you're close to your boss, something like that, you got to understand they're still your boss. And that's why sort of the relationship has to be a bit different, whether you want it to be or not, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think I go through this all the time I always joke that like I'm such a more of an assistant coach than I would be a head coach, because I just like having fun. I think that was my role as a hockey player. And with that hockey camp we run in the summer, I'm buddies with all these instructors. But then at times I'm like, you have to kind of drop the hammer.
Yeah,
like, hey, this is like, just remember, like you're working for us here.
I like it. At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. The following interview is brought to you by our good friends over at Greta Bar YYZ, the ultimate hangout spot in Toronto. Whether you're catching the big game, diving into some classic arcade action, or grabbing some unreal street food, Greta Bar's got you covered. Planning a team-building night for a corporate event, Greta Bar is the perfect place to bring the crew together for good vibes and great memories. For more info, head on over to gretabar.com. That's gretabar.com, 590 King Street West. Greta Bar, let the games begin. Pumped to bring in today's guest, one of our favorites. It is Darren Dreger. What's going on, Dregs?
Just kind of sorting through the aftermath, right? Kind of a juggling match, getting ready for Game 2 of the Oilers and the Stars tonight. Looking forward to that one. But before that, we've got everything that is around the Toronto Maple Leafs, including waiting for President and CEO Keith Pelley to address Leafs Nation at 1 o'clock Eastern. So a lot going on, in fact. Yeah.
Lots of moving parts, Dregs, and thank you for doing this. I wanted you to clarify something off the top. There's this perception out there on social media, I'm sure you've seen it, that the Leafs could have traded Matthew Knies for Mikko Rantanen. Can you lay everything to bed as to what's transpired? My other thing, I hate the take that about Mitch Marner. Like, why would he have waived his no trade clause? Can you just free up everything that happened around the deadline there with Knies too?
Well, there was a lot going on. I don't believe that Matthew Knies was ever seriously involved in trade conversations. I think we can appreciate if you're having a Mikko Rantanen conversation with the Carolina Hurricanes, why they would identify Matthew Knies as a piece of a puzzle that maybe comes together if you can get a deal done. Especially if Mitch Marner isn't willing to waive his trade protection, which we know he wasn't. And I think there's a myriad of reasons that went into that as well. Did it come close? Well, it depends on which side you talk to. The Carolina Hurricanes were willing. The Toronto Maple Leafs were willing. Toronto was not willing to include Matthew Knies. And when it came down to, well, is it as simple as Marner for Rantanen? It isn't that simple. It starts with Mitch Marner saying, okay, I'm open to the possibility. And in fairness to Mitch, that's why you negotiate those protective clauses in every single contract. He just couldn't get there. He couldn't get to that place at the trade deadline. But aside from an ask, perhaps, I don't think that Matthew Knies was really ever seriously involved.
Yeah, rightfully so, right? This is a player you can see for a lot of generations here. And, the way he plays in his game. Now, that being said, obviously the change with Shanahan's happened. Is this something that was a difficult one, you think, for Pelley and the Leafs? Or was this something the writing was on the wall with a second-round exit this year?
Well, I haven't spoken directly with Keith Pelley, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, and we'll hear from him at 1 o'clock. I assume it was a difficult decision to make. Maybe not difficult from a production perspective if you look back at the last decade. It's not like Brendan Shanahan hasn't been given essentially full autonomy. Everybody has a boss. His boss the board of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. So he had to face that board and explain, okay, we want to hire this guy. Go back to the days of Mike Babcock at $50+ million. Now we want to fire. Now we want to hire. Now we want to fire. I mean, all those things, right? Like that's what Brendan Shanahan's role was. And I know they earned deep respect from the board of Maple Leaf Sports. But as soon as Keith Pelly came in, and you look at the umbrella of work that Keith Pelly has to oversee, and it's not just the Toronto Maple Leafs, as we know. There are several significant sports entities under the ownership umbrella of MLSE. Well, that's what Keith Pelly has to stay focused on. So, was there a pound of flesh required? Maybe. I don't think that it even got to that point. I feel like if you look again at the bigger picture of the sports empire, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, you can see the changes that they are looking at, and they are executing at that level of executive office. If I'm Masai, am I wondering what's coming down the path? Probably. So I do want to say it was a difficult decision to reach because of everything that Brendan Shanahan was, both as a player and as an executive with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But at the end of the day, it's also a results-driven business. You're not going to fire Brad Treliving. He's too new as general manager. You're not going to gas Craig Berube. Why would you? The team, played well, until you got to game 7, game 5 of round 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So it wasn't easy, but it felt like with the expiring contract, it was something that, again, the board and the brass, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, felt they had to do.
And Drex, to your point, I think just humanizing it, anytime you get a new boss, they're prone to bring in their own people. You're always looking over your shoulder. And that's exactly, I think, sort of, how I looked at this situation as well.
Right.
Do you think it's the end of the president's role with this team for now?
That's the way it feels. The way it feels. I'd be surprised if Keith Pelly announces at 1:00 that he's already in the process of identifying the next Brendan Shanahan, whomever that might be. And I think it's twofold. I think that, Pelly has a healthy respect for what Brad Treliving can do as general manager, and maybe he takes on a bigger part of the role. So Treliving, as he would anyway, manages, oversees everything in hockey operations. And then Keith Pelly oversees everything on the business side to keep the board of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment and Rogers happy, right? I mean, ultimately, I think that that's the way it's going to go. And maybe, even though resources are never going to be an issue for Maple Leaf Sports, at the end of the day, doesn't matter what industry you're in. Our industry, the industry of making billions of dollars with this sports empire, I get that. Do you really need a $5 million guy in that office? I probably not. Probably not. But I say that, and I do want to acknowledge the work that Shanny did, because, guys, I've been here a long time, and I remember the pre-Brendan Shanahan days in Toronto. And I don't want to paint this picture like, the guys who were president and GMs before him were terrible managers. They weren't. It was just chaos all the time. And there was stuff going on, and the alumni wasn't in tune, and this wasn't going on and all. Well, Shanahan, above all else, brought stability and a higher level of pride, especially among ex-Toronto Maple Leaf players. You look at the statues outside the building. I don't think they're there without Brendan Shanahan. So his legacy will be that of maybe not winning, obviously, on the ice, certainly not winning a Stanley Cup, but returning the organization to a high level of respectability for all those who have come before him.
Dregs, I was sorry, Hutz. I was laughing yesterday with Rosie about one of the last things that Brendan Shanahan did was reach out to Rosie to get him an alumni jacket. I'm like,
not gonna lie, I chuckled a little bit at that too. I'm not gonna lie.
What are the chances he gets that jacket, Dregs?
Well, it's a good question. And look, and when he gets it, like, has Rosie been in the alumni suite yet?
He has, yeah.
Oh, interesting. And how has that gone for him? Is it okay? Like, people there
good feedback.
Warm and welcoming.
Yeah, okay. Good feedback, surprisingly.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Hey, look, whether it was Shanny's idea or not, I know we're having fun at the expense of Rosie because, he shoots from the hip. There's no doubt about that. And says some things that the current player and maybe some ex-players don't always love or appreciate. But if that wasn't Shanny's idea, it was somebody close to him. And again, it's not about muzzling Jay Rosehill. It's about maybe inviting him into that world and showing him a side that maybe Rosie isn't quite in tune with. There's nothing wrong with that. What is it? What's the saying? You keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah. Dregs, I gathered that too.
Honestly, I was talking about that earlier, Dregs. I feel like at times, like even we see Brad Marchand now, like in his interviews, he's so sincere and real. And I feel like it's endearing to fans. And sometimes seeing behind the curtain is important. And I think that's, what's gone on here. But with Shanny, all that he's built, all that he's done, that being said, you think he goes to the Islanders, and helps that team become into the 21st century, a team that doesn't even brand their players, doesn't have that kind of rapport. And this is a team that won 4 Stanley Cups in a row.
Yeah. And you're late to the dance here too, right? It's because you're coming into a process. And look, I'll be very honest, in checking into this earlier this morning, I'm not saying it isn't going to happen. It was described to me by someone close as a long shot. And I don't know why that is. I mean, it might be that Brendan Shanahan wants to spend more time with his family. He wants to travel. He wants to do all the things that really he hasn't been able to do for the better part of a decade. And before that, he was working with the league. And, then you go back to playing days and whatnot. So he's had a lot going on professionally for a long period of time. So if it doesn't work out with the Islanders, maybe it's purely a timing issue. But I am told that Shanahan most definitely wants to work again. But again, if we're focusing in on the Islanders, I can also understand why John Collins and the New York Islanders would want to try and convince Shanny to come into that mix. All along, Collins has made it be known that they want to build hockey operations around experience. Okay, well, if you're hiring Marc Bergevin and he's a solid candidate, he's happy to stay in Los Angeles, but he has legit NHL general manager experience. Matthew Darch is another guy who's, right there. Strong possibility. Doesn't have final decision GM chops, but he's been involved in management for a long, long time. But is either one of those guys the right fit for Brendan Shanahan, which takes me back to maybe the timing isn't right. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But I watch Shanahan, particularly at board meetings at the NHL level, in Florida. And the respect that is shown to him and the respect that he's earned in that circle. And guys, we're not talking about fellow presidents here. We're talking about owners, billionaires who gravitate to Brendan Shanahan. So if it's not the New York Islanders in the near future, then it'll be something else. He'll work when he wants to work.
Never know. Maybe he pops up on the TSN desk for all you know, right?
He's not taking that kind of a pay cut, trust me.
Good point. Mitch Marner, let's get to that conversation. Has he played his last game as a Maple Leaf? If so, who do you expect to be sniffing around on July 1 here?
Yeah, it feels to me like he has, right? For a lot of different reasons. We talk about change, and I think we've all speculated on what that might look like for the Maple Leafs. I think we've all embraced the reality that change is needed. They've got to do something to shake up the core of that team. Well, that, Carter, you can talk to this too. I mean, that happens from a player's standpoint. You don't have to be tapped on the shoulder and say, hey, by the way, we'd like you to waive your no trade because we feel like we need a change. When a player has earned his right to unrestricted free agency, why wouldn't you look at what your possibilities are? Because as hard as Marner and company have tried to get over the hump in Toronto, it hasn't happened. It may never happen. How do we know? It may not happen with this group. And I think that management and coaching can now clearly see that. So change is going to happen organically, but that's also a good thing for the player. I mean, what we know is that the interest in Marner, in Sam Bennett, in Tavares, if he gets there, is going to be vast. It is going to be league-wide, regardless of what the dollar amount is. And then you pile on, and I thought Mitch said all the right things. I thought that most of the players in their exit media availabilities, echoed the sentiment that, hey, pressure is what it is. Yeah, I get it. And I think you're right. Berube talked about how pressure has to come within the room. It has to come from your teammates. 100% it does. But how many of the guys in that room, need police detail outside of their front door so that they can keep their family protected. And that's the reality of the world of Mitch Marner. So if that is even a small contributing factor to him deciding that, you know what, I'm going to get paid anyway, and I can go here, get paid, and still contend for a Stanley Cup, why wouldn't I do that? Toronto is always going to be my home. I can have a cottage. I can have a house in Toronto. I can do all those things. I just don't have to deal with all of the extras. And look, I mean, now you go at it from a team perspective here too. And I don't care what anyone says. Look, when I watch that team play, I think, and this is my own personal view here, I think that there's too much internal competition with each other and not enough. All right, it doesn't matter who scores the goal, how the goal goes in the net. I don't need to necessarily put the puck in the net. I need to understand what my role is and do my job. We see that every game the Florida Panthers play. That's what we see. Don't see it with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And that's what Craig Berube and Brad Treliving are looking for. Bigger, stronger, heavier guys that can play the game that Berube demands. And they've got 13 plus schmil of Mitch Marner money to probably reinvest.
Yeah, and I'm with you there too. I feel like even now, you look at a guy, he's become a family man now. He has a kid. There's a different thing that comes over you, right? Being a younger guy in Toronto. I remember being a young guy in Nashville where it was a ton of fun because we were out, we were partying, we were doing everything. And then as I went to free agency, I earned that right, because one thing you learn as a player is if they get a chance to screw you when you're not playing well, they're going to, right? So you got to make your money when you can. But that being said, do you think, like, watching this playoffs now and guys, the way that it's played, like there's evidence now that like Mitch Marner or this team needs to be structured a little bit differently for Treliving, because he's brought in a lot of good players that have had an impact. You think now like it's another, learning season here for the Leafs?
I do. And I think that is the focus and the goal of management and the coaching staff is to find those players. But, that's the tricky part though, too, right? When you look at the class of unrestricted free agents, I mean, we always focus on the top guys. I'm not convinced that Sam Bennett wants to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm not. And that's not because he looks at all the nonsense that goes around this market. I'm not saying that. It's just this guy is going to have pick of the litter. Yeah, I mean, like there'll be 20 plus teams if he gets to free agents that are going, geez, I like the way he plays. He can play every style that you throw out there. So how deep are we going into free agency to find those guys? And, you look at the moves that Treliving made, especially around the trade deadline. Now, all of a sudden, some of your younger trade capital is getting thin, and your draft pick cupboard is suddenly turning bare. Like there are some challenges here for this group to acquire the pieces that they feel they need to play the game that they want to play. That it's going to be a challenge, but Treliving isn't afraid, man. I've been around this guy as a manager for a long, long time. Every trade rumor you guys have talked about or we've speculated on, he's a part of. That's the way he does his business. He feels like he's not doing his job unless he's involved in every single conversation. So let's see how that bears fruit. But it's, to acquire the pieces that Craig Berube wants and needs, I'm just not sure how Toronto does it. They'll have some money to spend if certain guys leave, but, it's going to be a challenge.
I can't believe I'm asking you this question, but Austin Matthews, is there any conversation to be had? Like, let's say somebody calls about him, would the Leafs pick up that call? And I would love your sort of opinion on how he handled everything at the end of the year, not disclosing much.
Yeah, he didn't disclose much. You're right. And I get that. And I've always supported that. I've never been a big fan of speculating or guessing on what we think is physically or mentally going on with a player. I just don't think it's right. I don't think it's right. I mean, there are certain things you can see when a guy's knee buckles the wrong way. Okay, well, he sustained a knee injury. I mean, thanks. We can see that. So I don't like the guessing game when it comes to the personal health of an individual player. And I've always thought, good on you. If you don't want to disclose, no different than the guy that says, yeah, I played with a torn oblique. Okay, well, geez, you're a tough dude. Good for you. But that's your right to disclose that if you choose. So I don't read too much into the health of Matthews. As for his future, I mean, come on. I mean, this guy is an absolute stud. He's a superstar. Did he want to perform at a higher level? Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we can come up with our own theories as to why he wasn't able to do that. I feel like the only play there is, for it to happen anytime soon. Who knows what we're talking about a year from now. If we're having this conversation again and the Leafs, get punted in the first round, well, all bets are off in every sense. Like all bets are off, and then we are having a different conversation, perhaps about management coach, just go down the list. I feel like for it to happen with Matthews at any point in the foreseeable future, that would be on him. That would be on him to come around and say, I'm not feeling it here. I don't believe that's even remotely a possibility. I mean, he's a proud dude. He's proud to be captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I know it's a sexy conversation and speculation, feeds the beast. I live it every single day. I just don't think in this case it's real.
And last one for me, Drags, the JT, does he take a discount to stay? Does he want to see this through? This is a guy that's, he's made his money, right? Like he's not going to be hard up when this is done. Does he stay there and try to see this through in Toronto? I
think he does. And, again, he pulled the curtain back, didn't he, as part of his media availability by saying, look, we had a very good conversation with Treliving and with Craig Berube. He wants to finish his career with the Maple Leafs. I don't know that you can do this with a number of players. You certainly can't with all of them. But I'm reminded of the Chris Tanev contract. And do you think that Treliving wanted to give Tanev that term? No, he did not. But like a lot of GMs now, he's sitting there looking at it and go, well, Chris Tanev is what the Toronto Maple Leafs blue line needs. So I'm not going to worry about what he looks like in year 4 or 5 or 6. I'm not. And chances are, if we're not successful, I won't be around to worry about it. And by going to that length, you get an affordable AAV. I honestly, guys, I think that that's going to be the approach they take with John Tavares. I don't know what that term is going to be. He turns 35 in September? But how do you replace that offense? If Marner is going to walk, as we talked about earlier, and our expectation is that he will, all right, there's 102 points that are out the window, right? What did John have this year? 38 goals?
Yeah.
Where's that offense coming from? Yeah. If you're not willing to give him even close to what market value is, right? And that's the tricky thing. What is market value for a soon-to-be 35-year-old who still has lots of pop left in his game? Well, you can look at what Steven Stamkos got from the Nashville Predators. Is that in the ballpark? If it is, I don't think Toronto is. I don't think Toronto can do that. I don't. But I also don't believe that they're somehow going to whittle his AAV down to $3.5 million per. Like, I don't see that either. There'll be a deferral attachment to it, all kinds of, trickery that you go into cap gymnastics. But there's a strong appetite from Toronto's standpoint and obviously from the player's standpoint to get something done. And I think he's still an important piece.
Bottom line, they need to win that negotiation, right? By all accounts, he just wants to talk to the Leafs and nobody else. I'll leave you with this one. July 1st, 2026, I heard some guy named Kirill Kaprizov is going to be a free agent. Now, I'm not referencing him, but what are the chances the Leafs maybe punt this offseason and look ahead? And what can you tell us about McDavid? Any sense one way or another yet?
Well, I mean, I can't imagine Toronto would do that. I just think that the appetite is too strong in this market to do that. And they believe in the group. They believe in their blue line is as good as it's been in many, many years, in my opinion. Carter's probably got a take on the goaltending. I think it's fine. I don't see that, there's an obvious upgrade out there. And then up front, again, we kind of skimmed over the possibilities of what they might try and add up front. It's still a really, really good team. They got beat by the defending Stanley Cup champions in Game 7. That's what happened. And now it looks like the defending champs are having their way with the Carolina Hurricanes. The last time I checked, Carolina is a pretty good hockey club, right? So I don't think that there's – and look, I do know you got to be super careful when you're trying to forecast too far down the road. Like the Philadelphia Flyers hired Rick Tocchet, obviously, recently. And part of the sales pitch to Talk was, we're going to go hard in the next 2 years. We feel like we're ready to turn that corner and be a contending team in the next 2 to 3 years. And okay, well, what's happening in the next 2 years? Well, Quinn Hughes might be available. A bit of a stretch to think that Quinn Hughes is going to sign in Philadelphia and play his brothers as much as he would have to in New Jersey, but it's possible. What about McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers? That's a dangerous game for organizations that are well built, and there's always good players to surround yourself. Different isn't always better, and it doesn't mean it's worse either. So I'm confident that Toronto is going to ice a real competitive team next year. It'll be different, but it'll still be good.
I know what teams can't tamper, but I'm starting this McDavid to Toronto debate in 2026. Dregs, you're the man. You've always given us so much time. I really appreciate that, and we'll talk soon, okay?
All right, guys, enjoy the playoffs.
You as well. That is Darren Dreger of TSN breaking things down. We really appreciate his time on today's show. Covered a variety of different topics there from Marner, JT. I had to get my McDavid question in there. It's a pipe dream, dude, but never say never, Huts.
You never know, right? The amount of shit he's dealt with, like, I don't think it would scare him off in this market. I was just trying to think about, like, when we look at stats, right? And we look at, like, points making up Marner's ground. And, like, then I look at the Panthers, right? Like, they only have, like, over 70 points is Barkov and Reinhart. And then after that, Kachuk only had 57, but he was lower. For guys that played the full season, 53 for Bennett, or 51 for Bennett, Carter Verhaeghe, 53, 45 for Lundell. So, like, yes, I understand the regular season points, right? Where Toronto has 4 guys over 70 points. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. As long as you're good enough to get in, it translates to like how you can play in playoffs. So take Marner's points and shoot him to the moon if he's not getting it done in the playoffs, where, like, right now you'd rather have on your team Sam Bennett or Carter Verhaeghe the way they produce in the playoffs. So that's like the build of this team. I know you can't overpay for that stuff, but man, a lot of fluff.
Hey, man, some players can learn a lot from what Dregs just did, tap dancing that McDavid question, man. I completely understand it. I had to ask it. He's not going to give us anything. And if he does, it's going to go nuclear. We all know that, right? So I applaud him for deflecting that. Great defense by Dregs there. But have to ask the question. You never know. You just never know. And when's the last time we talked to play like the generational talent, one of the best player maybe ever could be available in a year and a bit, and he's from Toronto? It's going to get louder and louder, Huts. I tell you, July 1 comes and he doesn't sign on the dotted line in Edmonton. It's going to be mayhem. I'm telling you right now, probably mayhem on this podcast, to be honest. We'll have like 3
if he doesn't have
hour
it,
podcasts.
if he doesn't have a contract by then, it will be chaos. But I don't blame Drags for avoiding that one at all costs.
Deflection, just a Matumbo. No. And I appreciate that from Dregs. It's time now for the crispy hot take of the day, presented by the Ninja Crispy 4-in-1 portable glass air fryer.
Meet the first of its kind. The Ninja Crispy Portable Cooking System. The power of a full-sized air fryer in the palm of your hand. So you can cook big or small batches. Just prep it, crisp it, serve it, and store it all in one.
It is an all-in-one system that includes 4-quart, 6-cup Tupperware glass containers and 2 storage lids. The Ninja Crispy is thermal shock resistant and can go from frozen to crispy in minutes. With the Crispy Power Pod, you get the power of a full-size air fryer in the palm of your hands. The 4-quart container fits 4 pounds of chicken or veggies. Cook a personal-sized meal in 7 minutes in the 6-cup container. Max crisp, bake, air fry, and recrisp with the Ninja Crispy. You can prep, cook, and store anything from crispy favorites to one-dish meals. Visit their website in the link in the show description and stay tuned for your chance to win a free Ninja Crispy. You ready for this hot take? I know I foreshadowed it a bit earlier on.
Yeah, I'm born ready, baby. Let's roll.
According to producer Vic, this is his hot take. Like Jonathan Huberdeau, Mitch Marner was in the perfect situation. Like Jonathan Huberdeau, Mitch Marner won't be the same player on a different team.
Oh, wow. I like that. I like that hot take too. I think riding shotgun with those guys makes a big difference. The only thing for me is just his value, just 5-on-5 everywhere, like how he can defend, how he can do it all. But it will be interesting to see. And I think we are going to find out here if those 100 points were just a product of being on a team that really knew how to score.
Under the weather, but still shooting fire.
Vicky, baby. Vicky.
And I think there's some validity to that, to be honest. And maybe it's not the same combo because he's more of a skill guy than Jonathan Huberdeau is. But, man, how often do you get a chance to play with a 69-goal scorer? How many apples did he get just from Austin Matthews scoring goals? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it's a fair debate. Like, would you be shocked if Mitch Marner had less points next year with whoever he plays than the last couple of years? I would.
No, not
maybe
at all.
around 85, 90 points.
Not at all. I think he will be humbled a bit by not being with those guys, right? The best 5-on-5 goal scorer in this generation. You know, you look at the numbers. So it will be interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it'll be the drop like Huberdeau had, but at the same sense, I do like that take. That's a good take, Vicky. Good job, buddy.
Good job, Vicky, playing under the weather. And I will commend Huberdeau. Really found himself again in Calgary, man. That must have been so difficult. You're always careful to feel bad when you guy makes, 11 and a half sheets per season or whatever it is. But that's got to be tough on mental health, man. Everything you know in Florida ripped away from you. That's a story that's not really talked about enough. He loved Florida so much. I could only wonder how long it took to adjust to life in Calgary, but a much better season for Jonathan Huberdeau, and I think his best days are past him, but still a really useful player. And at the beginning of that trade in year one, he was like a 40-point player. He was a Calle Yarncroke getting paid like over $10 million per season. So good on you, producer Vic. Good one today. Want to get in the action for Stanley Cup playoffs at Bet365? They got you from game props, player props, totals, and the money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners, conference champions, the Stanley Cup champions, and much, much more. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 or older. Ontario only. Please play responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, visit connexontario.ca. Yeah, my light's out. I don't know.
Shot the lights out. That ad read, eh, buddy?
Yeah. Oh, I know. I'm not even gonna walk over. We got like 3 minutes left in this show. Just you got a pick for today?
Write it out. I'm taking the Oilers tonight. I like the Oilers tonight, and I like the under. 6.5 is the line. I feel like the under hits tonight, and I just think the response from the Oilers will be big. So what do you got for me?
I like doing this show in the dark because then nobody in the chat can chirp my eyebrows. Not as
Yeah.
You know, and everybody just likes to chirp my appearance. Well, fuck you. No, I like the Oilers as well. I'm going to play the Oilers and McDavid over 1.5. I think Edmonton was the better team in game one. They did not win because they were terrible in the last 20 minutes, but I think they respond, and I'll take them at the value that they're giving tonight in game two. But Huts should be a fun weekend. I'll add as well. We're taking Monday off, so we'll be back in the mix next Tuesday, me and Rosie. Looking forward to an extended break this weekend and bringing some more Leafs talk to you guys all next week. Huts, great job today, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me. Have a good weekend.
I'm doing all the rest of the year in the dark, man. It's like Leafs After Dark. I love it. We already have TLN After Dark, to be honest. So thank you everybody in the chat at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Want to Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Thank you to producer Vic playing injured. Darren Dreger, appreciate him for dropping by today's program. For Carter Hutton, I'm Nick Alberga. Take care. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosa. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.